What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Stout Out Show, your one-stop shop for all things MMA bets, breakdowns, and predictions. On deck for today's show, we have UFC 321 coming at you from Abu Dhabi. In the main event, we got Tom Aspinall defending his heavyweight championship belt against Gane. And in the co-main, we got Veranda Yanjiroba taking on Mackenzie Dern for the vacant strawweight belt. But before we get into the main event, let's go right to the prelims. First on deck, we got Jaqueline Amorim taking on Mizuki Inoue for a strawweight bout. Amorim's a minus 475 favorite, while Inoue is a plus 340 dog. Amorim's riding her momentum really strong. She's 4-1 in the UFC. She's just coming off a submission win against Polyana Viana that happened in April. She has a 4-fight win streak, like I said, and a 100% finish rate. She's always hunting for her submissions. You know, she's not letting the fight drag on. She's not trying to outpoint you. She's literally take you down, transition, and get you in a submission, which I'm very big fan of. You know what I mean? You know, she's a little smaller for the strawweights. She's 5'3" with only a 68 inch, 68 inch reach. Her striking's a little bit there to be desired, but when it comes to Inoue, that kind of favors her. Inoue's got that karate background. She's able to manage distance, angles, and footwork really, really well. But the big thing for Inoue is that, she's had a 2-year layoff. She hasn't fought since September in 2023. I think that was her last win, was a unanimous decision win against Hannah Goldie. Inoue is no slouch. Mizuki's no slouch on the ground either. 60% of her wins do come by submissions, but I think when comparing the two, I just think Amorim is just in a whole different ball game. You know what I mean? It's just, there's levels to this shit. You know what I mean? So I think she's going to take it, if she takes it to the ground, she's got a good likelihood of being reversed and put in submission. Ring rust is a real thing too, everybody. Is her cardio going to be there? Is that going to be there? I mean, 2-year layoffs is nothing to slouch at. So I'm going to go with Amorim for the victory with this one. I'm going with Vegas. I think she's going to take it by submission. I'm going to say it's going to be an early finish. I'm going to either say late round 1 or early round 2, but definitely she's going to get the submission victory. All right, next up we got in the flyweight, we got Azat Maksum taking on Mitch Raposo. Maksum is a minus 350 favorite, while Raposo is a plus 275 underdog. Maksum's 1-2 in the UFC. He just lost to Tajir Ulanbekov. That happened in June. He's kind of, hitting a 2-fight losing skid right now. His striking, this fight is kind of like, it's not a pick 'em, obviously, because he's minus 350, but it's just, which one's got the higher output of winning. Like I said, his striking's modest. It's 23% accuracy. He defends takedowns pretty well. Maksum does. He's got pretty good defensive takedowns, and but his takedown offense is kind of lacking. Sometimes he struggles to oppose his will, and especially against aggressive wrestlers. If he's able to chain wrestle, shoot, reshoot, and kind of defend defend Raposo's takedowns, I think he's got it in the bag for sure. Raposo, on the other hand, he's 0-2 in the UFC. He just is coming off a split decision loss. Big thing for him, though, he's pretty hard to finish. He's never been knocked out. He uses his feints and footwork, extremely well. He likes to set up his punches pretty good, sit down on them, and just, he's not overly aggressive with high volume output, but likes to kind of pick his shots, which I like. He definitely has real knockout potential. He's got that one-shot power. Like I said, he sits down on his punches. He's got that one-shot power knockout. But he's pretty, he can mix it up. He's not just solely a striker, just solely a wrestler. He kind of, he's got multiple pathways to victories, which I like. The downside to him, though, obviously, other than being 0-2 in the UFC, the talent gap might be there. He definitely takes a lot of shots too, man. So to deliver 1 or 2 power shots, he's going to eat about 2 or 3, to give it out. I definitely just think the X factor for this fight is basically is Raposo's ability to win the wrestling transitions. If he can make Maksum fight off his back foot, defend the takedowns and work from positions, Raposo can definitely flip the script and get the victory. But, conversely, if Maksum can defend, defends early and maintains range and good volume, he's going to win it. But I think Maksum is going to win this one. I'm going to say round 2 submission. I think Maksum's the better wrestler, and I think overall his grappling game is a little bit tighter. So Maksum, round 2 submission. Next up, we have the heavyweights is going to be Hamdy Abdul-Wahab taking on Chris Barnett, the return of Chris Barnett. Abdul-Wahab's the heavy favorite. He's a minus 380 favorite, while Chris Barnett is a plus 290 underdog. Very random fact, by the way. I don't know why. Maybe somebody can tell me in the comments. I saw Chris Barnett has like the Spanish flag under his name on ESPN. I don't know. Is he part Spanish? I just kind of find that odd. I've never even heard that before. Anyway, Abdul-Wahab, if you guys didn't know, his background is like wrestling. Been popped a couple times for south of the border supplements, but that's beside the point. He's coming off unanimous decision loss to Muhammad Usman, who, ironically enough, just got popped for south of the border supplements. I don't know if that's going to be overturned or not, but yeah. He was supposed to fight Valter Walker last fight card, but Walter Walker's now on this UFC 321. But we'll get to his fight in a second. Anyway, Abdul-Wahab, background is Greco-Roman wrestling. Was in the Olympics for Greco-Roman wrestling. He's going to try to impose his will, close the gap, and just look for the takedown and ground and pound. And also not only that, but he's got significant power in his hands. The majority of his fights finish early if he by TKO or KO. I can definitely see him looking to take, like I said, Barnett down to the ground. Barnett for heavyweight is, he's a shorter fighter. He's only 5'9". The big thing for Barnett, though, which is catches everybody off guard, especially when I saw against him fight for the first time against Jan Vellante, is that he is so agile for being 5'9". I mean, he uses those spinning wheel kicks and those back kicks. They come out of nowhere, and they land. If they land pretty accurately. It definitely took me back the first time I saw it. Excuse me. He hasn't fought this year. This is his first fight in 2025. His last fight was against Kennedy Njoku. He lost via TKO. He likes to blitz forward. Flurries. Blitz forward, use flurries, combinations, and then get back out. 18 of his 23 wins are, like I said, by KO or TKO. He's not looking to take you down to the ground at all, especially, against a guy who's literally Olympic caliber wrestling like Hamdy. That's not even remotely in the game plan. So I'm going to take, Abdul-Wahab for the TKO victory in this one. I'm going to say this comes to, later round 2. I think Abdul-Wahab, hopefully he's learned from his last fight against Usman. He had him kind of, in round 1, he came out super strong, was ready to rock and roll. But after that, when he got to the third round, dude, he was gassed, dude, and he was just getting his ass kicked. So I'm going to go, like I said, Abdul-Wahab, round 2, I'm going to say TKO. All right, anyway, on to the next one. We got the featherweights, Nathaniel Wood taking on Jose Miguel Delgado. Nathaniel Wood's the plus 125 underdog, and Delgado's the minus 150 favorite. Nathaniel Wood's 8-3 in the UFC, just coming off unanimous decision win against Morgan Charrier in March. He's riding a 2-fight win streak. Very, very good takedown defense. He's 73% in the takedown defense. Definitely pretty solid there. Lands strikes at a pretty good rate too. More, better than average for the featherweight division. Good credible submissions. Good. Like I said, takedown defense. But I think if his opponent can take him into longer scrambles and kind of close the distance and threaten it, that's where he kind of gets in a little bit of trouble. If his opponent is basically a high-level wrestler, that's when he's really, it kind of goes on the back foot. Delgado is a beast, though. He's 3-0 in the UFC. He's riding a 7-fight win streak, and, he's coming off that KO win against Haider Emil, which happened in June. To date, all 10 of his wins have been by KOs or TKOs. He has literally got some knockout power, and just, he lands about, six significant strikes in a minute. Good, very, very good striking volume. Accuracy is around 46%, which is below average, obviously. But when you're throwing fucking fire with both fists and legs, that you can kind of manage it. The big thing I would say, the takeaway, if anything, is that he definitely absorbs a good amount of damage too. So if Nathaniel Wood can get in there, close the distance, he's got a shot. But I'm going to go with Delgado for this one. I'm going to say that Delgado, keeps the momentum alive and is going to continue to, finish fights. I'm going to say Delgado, second round knockout. I like his fight IQ. I like his composure and his aggressiveness. So, Jose Delgado. Anyway, we move on, as the guru would say. Next up, we got Valter Walker taking on Louie Sutherland, who's making his UFC debut. As I said before, Valter Walker was supposed to fight last fight against Usman, but Usman popped for PEDs. So Valter Walker, while he looked like he was going to hulk out and rage and fucking just kill the room, managed to calm down. Now we're here in Abu Dhabi. Valter Walker is 3-1 in the UFC. He's 6'6" with a 78-inch reach advantage. Dude is a fucking animal. Good mix of striking and takedowns. He comes out with his foot on the gas, and is super aggressive. What I like, what everybody talks about him is his heel hook game. It's at an elite level. He's got 3 finishes strictly with heel hooks. Definitely elite level when it comes to the ground. He hasn't fought the top, elite guys of the heavyweight division, but that's something that Louie Sutherland does not. Louie Sutherland is, making his UFC debut. On the good side, though, he is on a 4-fight win streak, and he's not, he's got some power in his hands. He's got, 80% of his wins are coming by KO or TKO. So if he finds your chin, he can knock you out. I just think that, I think he fought on the PFL a couple times too. I just think that, again, like we've seen, when people step up to the UFC, they find out very, very quickly that there's levels to this. If you would have told me that Patchy Mix was going to lose 2 fights in a row, I would have told you you're fucking crazy, but here we are. He is, oh, dude, I can't, that's on a whole other, video about Patchy Mix just fucking laying an egg 2 fights in a row. Anyway, the X factor for this fight would be, hey, can Louie Sutherland keep on his feet during the duration of the fight and keep him Walker at distance so he can secure a knockout? I don't think he can at all. I think that fucking Walker's going to come in aggressively, take him down, submission, round 1, end of story. But we'll see. Plus, Louie Sutherland's kind of on a short notice anyway. So, anyway, we move on. Going on to the next fight, we got Abdul-Kareem Al-Selwady taking on Matheus Camilo in a lightweight bout. Al-Selwady is 1-1 in the UFC. He's just coming off a KO loss to Louie Radzhabiev. That happened in March. Definitely fucked up that name. Sorry if I screwed it up. Lands significant strikes at a pretty solid pace. He's got like four significant strikes a minute, so he's definitely hunting for that knockout. Doesn't really go for submissions often. I'm definitely going to say that this fight's going to stay on the feet. Camilo's the same way. His striking accuracy is kind of modest. It's 38%, so it's not, but he's younger in the game, so, or to this level as it will. Unfortunately, all of his losses are by KO or TKO. So, if Camilo can find his chin, he's going lights out. Lives by the sword, dies by the sword type of deal. Look for, Selwady kind of to dictate the pace, forward pressure, especially when it comes to clean counterpunching. But, he's going to try to overwhelm Camilo. Camilo, on the other hand, he's coming off a sub loss to Gabriel Green that happened in May. He's actually 0-1 in the UFC. I do like his ability to kind of like sit down on his punches and like dictate where the fight's going to go. He's kind of cerebral, patient, really calculated with his strikes. Not only calculated with his strikes, but his calf kicks are a game changer, dude. Like I've seen him just destroy dudes' legs, and that can really alter the fight for a guy like Selwady who's coming forward. He's got good submission skills too. I know he's not really looking to take it to the ground, but he's, definitely can do it if need be. His defensive grappling kind of needs some work, but again, like I said, Selwady's not trying to take it to the ground anytime soon. Selwady's coming out there looking for a KO. Camilo, all 3 of his losses are by submission, but the same token, though, like I said, Selwady's not looking to take it down. X factor on this one is going to be, I guess, poise versus precision. If Al-Selwady keeps calm and defends the takedown, his pressure is going to win the day. But on the other hand, if Camilo, fights smart and, traps Zawadi in grappling, and then, kind of varies it up with his striking. His youth is going to win the day. So I'm going to say Camilo's going to win this day. Camilo's going to win it via submission, probably round 3, if not mid to round 2, just because I just don't think Al-Selwady's ground game is there. It's not there at all. But Camilo, yeah, definitely taking the win. Next up, we got another lightweight fight. It's Ludovit Klein taking on Matheus Rebecki. Klein is 7-3-1 in the UFC. He's coming off unanimous decision loss to Matheus Gamrot that happened in May. I like Klein's kicks, man. He's got really, really good, accurate kicks, whether they come to the leg or the body or the head. He sets up strikes that leads to highlight reel knockouts via kicks. He's a southpaw, uses his angles really well. He can submit guys. He's kind of varied in that regard. But prior to his loss against Matheus Gamrot, he was on a 4-fight win streak. If he can just manage his pressure and kind of not get taken down, he definitely has the tools to win. Kind of climb up the ranks in the lightweight division. He's got 2 submission losses on the other hand, so he's not really there in terms of high level grappling. But do I think Rebecki is a high level grappler? Not really. He's 3-2 in his last 5, and his last loss was to Chris Duncan that happened in August. He can finish fights both ways. I know he can finish fights either striking or submissions, but he gets in these volume exchanges with guys. He's not really calculated. He goes in there pretty hard. He's got a susceptible amount of submission wins, but like I said, it's they're up and down. He wins 2, loses 2, wins 1, loses 1. He kind of, he takes risks, super aggressive, but that leaves, room for counters and, high level, guys to touch his chin when he's not wanted. The X factor for me for this one is Rebecki's relentless pressure and grappling control versus Klein's counter striking, precision, and defensive composure. Basically, can Klein stay composed and sharp and, keep the Rebecki at bay from crashing forward? I'm going to say Klein wins this one. I think this one goes the distance. I think Klein is going to be, I think he's going to get back on those winning ways. I think he can get back into the top 15. So I'm going to go look Klein for the win on this one. All right, next up, we got Ikram Alizikurov taking on Jung-Sung Park in a middleweight bout. All right, this is going to be my upset for the week. I'm going to pick, Alizikurov is a -260 favorite, and Park is a +210 underdog. Alizikurov is coming off a TKO win against Andre Munoz that happened in April. He's got a super, super, super good jab. Everything comes behind his jab of what he's looking to set up. A lot of his offense is coming. Everything flows through that jab. He moves in and out. He shifts laterally really well, and he manages distance pretty good. Especially he's got a good front teep too, man, with his left foot. Uses those push kicks to really establish the distance. Does he have the advantage on the does he have the advantage on the feet? It's left to see. Again, Park is a good established boxer. He's got very good combinations and hand speed. I see what I like to see is, for as far as Alizikurov goes, his opponents have attempted to counter right. They counter his hooks, counter his kicks pretty well. If they see it coming, they can opponents can kind of time it out where they can see the kicks coming from a little bit. I think Park has the ability to do that. Park is, like I said, he's coming off unanimous decision win against Ismail Nardiev that happened in April. He's got a 2-fight winning streak himself. He's got solid, significant strike output. He's got, 4 significant strikes a minute. He isn't overly biased in terms of striking or grappling. He can definitely shift between the two pretty regularly. And he's got multiple submission wins. So his ground game is something to be respected, Unfortunately, though, which he cannot do in this fight is, he succeeds a significant amount of significant strikes. He takes about 3 a minute, too. So, the X factor for me for this one is pretty much who's going to dictate the fight where it wants to go. The mat or keep it standing. As Alizikurov gets his way, it's going to be takedowns, it's going to be grappling, and it's going to be looking for the early finish. Park, if he's doing what he's supposed to do, he's going to get his way into stand-up exchanges. He's going to defend the takedowns, and he wants to keep he's going to trying to grind the fight into a decision and keep it into the later rounds, whether it's obviously later rounds being round 3. I'm going to go Young Sung Park for the decision in this one. I think he grinds it out. I think he's going to keep Ozzy Kurov at bay, so I'm going to go with Park for the win on this one. All right, the last fight on the prelim card is going to be Nasrat Haqparast taking on the Australian Quillan Salkhild. This is going to be a pick'em fight, Vegas has it. This is, again, we're still sitting on the lightweight division. Haqparast is 10-4 in the UFC. He's coming off a split decision win against Esteban Ribovics that happened in March, and he's riding a 5-fight win streak. Haqparast is a tested veteran. He's a 10-4. Like I said, he's 10-4 in the UFC. His style is kind of aggressive, but it's calculated. He applies pressure, cuts angles really well, and uses those southpaw kicks to his advantage. Then he gets, his combinations are really, really, good too. Significant strikes are sitting around 6, but is the kryptonite going to be Quillan Salkhild's takedowns? Salkhild is relentless when it comes to takedowns. He's got that power wrestling. He's 3-0 in the UFC. He's coming off a unanimous decision. Wilton Yanil Ashmuj. Kind of what I saw in the Ashmuj fight is when it hit round 3, Salkhild kind of looked like he was a little winded. Looked like he spent a lot of his gas out in the first 2 rounds. But on the same token, one of his fights he attempted 23 takedowns. Landing 8. So he is going to get a takedown, dude. He's always grinding for those takedowns. His ground game's pretty legit. The X factor basically is, okay, can Salkhild, impose his rising momentum and, versatile finishing against Haqparast's experience. I think Haqparast's going to keep, derail the hype train when it comes to Salkhild. Like I said, Salkhild's 3-0 in the UFC. Definitely has the confidence. Definitely, utilizes his height and reach to his advantages. But I think Haqparast is the guy to do it. I mean, I think he's got the tools to keep Sutherland at bay. I think the fight's going to go distance. I think that really pays an advantage to Haqparast's bag. He's got the cardio for it. So I'm going to say Haqparast for the win, be a decision. The fight's going to go the distance. Hey, everybody, just taking a quick break from the video to say if you like what you're seeing, like what you're hearing, please like, comment, and subscribe. Let me know how you're doing with the picks in the comment section, and don't forget to share the video. So, again, look forward to seeing and hearing from you in the future, and on to the main card. All right, main event time. First fight to kick it off is going to be number 7, Alexander Rakic, taking on number 10, Azat Mirzakhanov in the light heavyweight division. All right, this Rakic is in desperate need of a win here. He's 6-4 in the UFC. He fought Magomed Ankalaev in October of 2024. He's riding a 3-fight losing streak. Okay, good thing is he's as far as striking is concerned, he throws really good, really lethal combinations. He likes to dismantle his opponent's legs, and he likes to control the range. Unlike some opponents who, set up their combos via the jab, he uses it less frequent and less often. He kind of goes for more direct strikes, and straight to combinations, rather than building it up with longer jabs. His power is a major asset. It's a major, key to victory for him. He's got a lot of wins that come by via TKO or KO. Against elite wrestlers and high-level grapplers, that's kind of where Rakic kind of, is tested and, kind of be brought down to the ground. He kind of struggles in that regard, but if he can keep guys at range, keep guys at, his distance the way he likes it, he's definitely set up for a win. Mirzakhanov, on the other hand, is another animal entirely. He is, 6-0 and undefeated right now. He had a nice TKO win against Brandon Ribeiro that happened in June, and he's riding a 6-fight win streak. When you have that mindset of coming into a fight that you're undefeated and nobody can fuck with you, it's like it kind of puts you on a whole different level. Now, I'm not saying he's like overlooking Rakic by any means, but Rakic is, he's desperate for a win. He's like, am I out the door or what? And I'm going against the guy who, and I don't even know how he's ranked ahead of Mirzakhanov when you lost 3 fights in a row, but that's neither here nor there. Mirzakhanov, he is shorter for the division. He's 5'10", he does show some glaring holes in his takedown defense and wrestling. He can be dominated at the ground at times, but again, if people were to dominate him, he wouldn't be undefeated. He's got really legit power. If he catches, Rakic early, he can definitely, early, finish the fight early. I think that's what's going to happen, to be honest. The X factor in this fight is basically, can Rakic remain at his best physically, keep the fight at range? Is his mobility going to hold up, as well as his defense? Mirzakhanov, I think his power is going to be too much for him. I think this fight's going to end pretty early. I think it's going to end in round 1 via TKO. So Mirzakhanov for the win. All right, next up we got in the heavyweight division, Alexander Volkov taking on Yalton Almeida. Yalton Almeida is the new up-and-comer heavyweight. We last saw Volkov take on Cyril Gane, where he lost that bullshit split decision. I had him winning that the whole way. I think the majority of people, even Dana White, had him winning it. I thought he got robbed, but hey, it is what it is. That happened in July, so he's on a quick comeback. Think about it like Volkov. Obviously, he's been around. You know what I mean? He's always been at the top echelon of the heavyweight division. He's 12-5. He's kind of seen it all. I think at this point in his career, he's kind of being used as the litmus test for the heavyweights. If you're good enough to step into that top echelon of top 10, top 5, you're going to have to fight Volkov. Volkov's still ranked number 2 and Almeida is number 5. But anyway, Volkov uses that nice stiff jab, good reach, likes to good, he's got he reaches 80 inches, and he's not reckless, man. He keeps his composure and he's super calculated throughout the fight. He uses those snap kicks and those teeps really, really well. And he likes to pick his opponents up by, methodically and, not really overcommitting to one shot or not. He doesn't really pack a ton of power in his punches. It's not really one-shot KOs that kind of finish his opponents, but more of, like I said, combinations, really putting it on, weathering it on him, in the mid to late rounds. He does have a submission game. We saw that against Tai Tuivasa. He got that Ezekiel choke, but I don't think that this fight, he's not trying to take it to the ground with Yalton Almeida. Yalton Almeida is definitely going to try to take it to the ground. But, if he executes his distance games and, keep things upright, he's definitely got a chance to win it. But Yalton Almeida, dude, he's 9-1. He's riding a 2-fight win streak, and he's a beast. He uses unorthodox takedown methods. He comes in really weird angles, but he's so athletic that he's getting his opponents down to the ground. He got Curtis Blades down to the ground a number of times until Curtis Blades kind of saw it come, or kind of was able to read his book and pretty much turn his lights out. But Curtis Blades is a high level grappler, man. He's phenomenal. He was a solid collegiate wrestler. Volkov is not that. I think he's going to be able to close the distance and get in pretty easily against Volkov and take him to the ground and get that, ground and pound TKO. He's able to run like physically and athletically. He's literally able to run over a who's who of, the heavyweight division. He has good clean. He's able to execute good clean shots, avoids opponent's timing. I thought, that's not really talked about is he doesn't absorb a lot of damage, man. He keeps distance pretty well, able to, use feints pretty good. But, again, if he's fighting a heavily favored grappler, that's when he's in trouble. Volkov is not that. The biggest X factor I see for this fight is, can Volkov keep it standing? Can Volkov keep him at distance and at range so he can use that little kickboxing game? Or will Almeida be able to run through him physically? And I think that Almeida is going to do that. I think Almeida is going to take him down early and often, come in hot and heavy, and I think Almeida is going to literally, I think he's going to get the finish probably the second round. Volkov, like I said, he's mid-30s, kind of end of the ride, so, Almeida all the way. All right, next up we got the return of Umar Nurmagomedov taking on Mario Batista in a bantamweight bout. Umar Nurmagomedov is a -700 favorite against Batista, who's a +450. Umar is still ranked number 2, while Batista is number 8. I know the odds are obviously kind of, very far apart and kind of underwhelming, but I would not put it past Batista to get an upset here. Batista has made me look, foolish. I thought I had him going into the Patchy Mix fight. I thought he was going to get owned. I thought Patchy Mix was going to make a statement win. And he dominated Patchy Mix from the start of the bell to the end, man. Just destroyed him. He's got And that happened in June this summer. So, he's got an average significant strikes about 5. He's undefeated. He's riding a 5-fight win streak, and his strike defense is above average at 54%. He uses, sometimes his takedowns, they can get shucked off, they can get shut down, but he's so relentless with it. He's like, he keeps the pace up, like, time and time again. He's got pretty good strike output. His defense is pretty solid. He doesn't have an overwhelming power when it comes to like knockouts, but he's pretty good at picking his shots and using his strikes technically. On the other side, he does absorb a pretty good amount of strikes, 3 per minute. But I don't see Umar Nurmagomedov. He's got good striking, but again, he's kind of like Batista, where he's not got crazy knockout power. It's just good enough strikes to set up for a takedown or to keep his assert his dominance on the ground. Like I said, but Umar literally hasn't fought since January, coming off that loss against Merab. It was a 5-rounder, obviously. Umar kind of faded in the later rounds. But, 3-round fight, kind of in his wheelhouse. You know what I mean? He's going to look to push the pace early and often and get, just dominate on the ground. I think that, Batista is has got a good ground game, but I just think Umar Nurmagomedov's the level above when it comes to, getting takedowns and wrestling. He likes, like I said, likes to push the face and do constant strike downs. I don't think Batista is, I think they're both the same level when it comes to striking. They both, nothing really stands out to me in terms of, who's better in that regard. I think they're both pretty equal. I just think it's, if, Umar, since his time off, has improved his defense, he paces the fight at a better rate. I think he's going to take this one home. So I'm going to say Umar is going to take this one. It's going to go the distance, but yeah, Umar Nurmagomedov for the win. All right, the co-main event is Varana Jandiroba taking on Mackenzie Dern for the vacant strawweight belt. This is a rematch from 5 years ago where Dern got the win via unanimous decision. Jandiroba is a plus 140 underdog, while Dern is a minus 170. Jandiroba is 8-1 in the UFC. She's coming off of a great win, a unanimous decision win in April, and she's riding an awesome 5-fight win streak. 14 out of her 22 wins are all by submission. She's constantly looking for that, she's not looking to outlast, outpoint you. Once it's going to the ground, she's hunting for the finish, which I really like. Downside, she's 37, and she's fought, Mackenzie Dern before and lost. So she's definitely a little old in the tooth, and her striking, while it's improved, is not at the level where I think it's going to need to turn, make the difference for the Dern fight. I think for Mackenzie Dern, if she was fighting, like she said, like recently, if she was fighting Zhang Weili, I think this fight's going to go a whole different game. I don't think Mackenzie Dern's striking is not that level that it needs to be. Mackenzie Dern just finished Amanda Rivas with a great win. That happened in April. She's riding a 2-fight win streak. I think Dern's big thing is that she's got, the spotlight's on her now. She's got to get this win, She kind of goes, hey, 2 wins, 2 losses, a win, loss, win, loss. I think she's finally found her momentum now. She's got a little bit of confidence in her now that she's already, fought Jandiroba already and won. So the big X factor here is, if Jandiroba can get into a rhythm and take Dern down repeatedly and dominate position and threat subs, she's got a pretty good path to controlling the fight and getting the victory. However, if Mackenzie Dern can keep the fight where she wants it, especially using, her striking is improved, and same with her grappling transitions, she can dominate on the mat. She can outpace and outwork Jandiroba. It's pretty much comes down to the grappling exchanges of who wants to take the fight where. I think Mackenzie Dern, it's her time to shine. I think she's going to get the victory. I think it's going to be another decision win. I think, again, she's going to outlast her, 5-rounder. So Mackenzie Dern for the win, unanimous decision. All right. And in the main event, we have the champion, Tom Aspinall, taking on the challenger, Ciryl Gane, in a heavyweight championship belt. This is literally Tom Aspinall's first fight this year. He last fought last summer in July 2024. And, he's forever waiting on John Jones to freaking pull the fight together. Obviously, that never happened. So, hey, shit or get off the pot. It's time to go to work. Okay, I think this fight's going to be, I like Tom Aspinall has got, he's not cocky. He's very respectful, but I think that this thing is not even going to see round 3. You know what I mean? This is going to go out pretty early. Tom Aspinall can take the fight wherever it wants to go. He's awesome on the ground. He's awesome on the feet. He blitzes early and often. He packs really, really good power. His agility is really good, especially for a heavyweight, and his level changes are pretty good too. And he hits like a fucking truck, dude. I mean, he's got good, strong counter punching, and he's always looking for those openings too. Super, super explosive. Gane, on the other hand, he just fought. He's the fresher fighter. Obviously, ring rust isn't going to be a thing for him. He fought in July of this year, but I think he lost that fight, dude. He lost to Alexander Volkov. I think he didn't do enough to freaking really for anything to stand out to me. The good thing with Gane, though, again, like the thing that I think he matches up with Aspinall really well is he's really light on his feet too, man. For a big guy, he can move around really, really well. He's traditionally a southpaw, but he uses that switch stance pretty awesome. He mixes up that like teep kick, toe stab thing pretty good, and uses very combinations and setups to kind of do it. But Gane is not like solely like a one-punch knockout guy, unlike fucking Aspinall. He uses, he builds a striking game with setups and combinations and, kind of uses distance to his advantage, Over time, he's kind of diversified his game. He's gotten better on the ground. He's gotten better with, submission defense and grappling offense. But, again, he's fighting Tom Aspinall. And I think that, this kind of fight was just set up like, hey, man, we need somebody to challenge Tom Aspinall. Tom Aspinall has been waiting for a fight for a while. Who wants to go? And Cyril Gane's like, yeah, let's go. I think Cyril Gane's going to get ran through. I think it's going to be pretty easy for Aspinall. Round 2, at the latest knockout, but I say round 1 knockout, Tom Aspinall, and still. All right, that concludes our video. Please like, comment, subscribe, and shoot it!